بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Inshallah, before we get into our lesson, I'd just like to highlight or touch on something that is very important for us to understand when it comes to matters related to fiqh. When it comes to matters related to fiqh. Fiqh comes from the word of understanding. And knowledge, the knowledge of fiqh is based on the understanding of the alim. And the understanding of the alim comes from the Quran and Sunnah. It comes on from the Quran and Sunnah, what he understood from the Quran and from the Sunnah. And every alim, his knowledge or his understanding of the Quran and Sunnah depends on his reading. How much he's read, how much he understood, how much of the language he understands, how much of the qawa'id in hadith or in the qawa'id in usul al-fiqh and so on he has. For that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentions that مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for this individual, He gives him understanding of the deen. يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. He gives him the knowledge of the deen. The Prophet ﷺ added to that hadith. Most of the time we hear that part of the hadith. Always we hear that part of the hadith. مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. But there's an addition to that part, which is the Prophet ﷺ, he says, وَأَنَا الْقَاسِمُ وَاللَّهُ الْمُعْتِي أو وَاللَّهُ يُعْتِي وَاللَّهُ يُعْتِي. That I am the Qasim, I am the one that spreads this fiqh of the deen. So he is the one who narrates to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayats, the ahadith and so on. And Allah is the mu'ti, He is the one who gives this understanding to the people. So from there we understand that the level of understanding is given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people's level of understanding to a specific hadith may be greater than others. For that reason, they're able to derive more ahkam from a single hadith compared to somebody who had the same hadith but was unable to reach the same conclusion as this alim, because of this alim's extensive knowledge or understanding of the hadith. At the same time, an alim, he's Bani Adam, he's a mankind, he makes mistakes. For that reason, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, فإذا اجتهد الحاكم فله أجران. فإذا اجتهد الحاكم, if the hakim or the imam, he makes an ijtihad, he strives to reach a conclusion in regards to an issue that's pertaining to Islam, فأصاب, and he gets it right, فله أجران, he has two rewards, the reward in his ijtihad and the reward of getting it right. So he put his effort in looking at the dalil, in looking at the Quran, looking at the hadith, and he came to the conclusion that this is the hukum based on this ayah and this hadith. And he got the hukum right. He received his ajr for the ijtihad, the effort that he put in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't let his effort go to waste. He rewarded him for that. And he also received a reward for getting the matter correct. And the Prophet ﷺ, on the counterpart, he mentions that فَإِذَا أَقْطَأَ فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ. If he makes a mistake, bima'na, he can make an ijtihad, but at the same time get it wrong. He sees the evidence in front of him, he looks into the evidence, he studies the evidence. Eventually the outcome of the evidence was incorrect. The outcome of the evidence was incorrect, from his understanding. But yet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the reward of striving, for trying to get to the outcome. But he never received any reward for the mistake. Bima'na, it shows you that he can make a mistake. An alim can make a mistake. So when you see in the fiqh that this scholar said this and this scholar said this and their opinion is different and this opinion is different, why is it this, why is it that, how come there's a dalil for this, how come there's a dalil for that, why is this dalil da'if, why is this? This all comes down back to the understanding of the alim. And there are many factors that can impinge on the understanding of the alim. For example, language barrier. For example, his understanding of hadith and its principles. For example, his understanding of usul al-fiqh and how it is applied. For example, in the Quran, the ulama in the verse, for example, they looked at أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءِ. The scholars, when they looked at this term, they both have the exact same term, أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءِ. If you were to touch a woman. This is one of the things that breaks your wudu. The madhab of the Shafi'iyya, they understood it to be a touch. The other ulama, they understood it to be a matter of intimacy. It's not a matter of touch, but a matter of intimacy. They both have the same ayah, the same text, the same word. The outcome of that is different. This is based on their understanding of the language. This is based on their understanding of the language. So whenever you see the scholars having different opinions in the matters related to the deen, this is not something to do, Islam is not clear, or Islam, its ahkam is not clear, or there's a problem in Islam, or Islam is contradicting itself. This is not a matter that's to do with Islam. This is a matter to do with the alim's ijtihad, the alim's understanding of the text. The text of the Quran is the same. The text of the hadith is the same. But what was derived from it, the outcome of that may be different. The outcome of that may be different. And this is based on the person's understanding and knowledge and how much of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed this individual to obtain from it. So inshallah, when you see in the Sifatu Salat al-Nabi, in our lessons, that the scholars said this and the scholars said this, why have they differed? This is based on their knowledge of the hadith, their knowledge of what was narrated to them, and how they graded that hadith. They see this hadith to be authentic, while another sees this hadith to be da'if. And this comes down to the science of hadith, their knowledge, their understanding of the science of hadith. So inshallah, I just wanted to clarify that for the people, in case some people were confused in regards to the different aqwal or the different positions that have been mentioned throughout our lessons, given that the Prophet ﷺ prayed in a specific manner. Tamam? Jazakumullah khair. Moving forward, we stopped at the dua of the ruku'. So we mentioned that the person, he goes into the ruku', and we mentioned the sifah of going to the ruku', and we stopped at that. The next thing is the dua of the ruku'. What does the person say when it comes to the dua while he's in a state of ruku'? Different narrations have come from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in regards to what to say. A narration from Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, he mentions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Subhana Rabbil Azim, Subhana Rabbil Azim, Subhana Rabbil Azim. This is the one that everybody most knows or is comfortable in saying. And this is found in Sunan al-Nisa'i, hadith number 113. Hadith number 113. Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions two other variations in regards to the dua that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam would recite in his ruku'. She mentions the first one, Subbuhun Quddusun Rabbul Malaikati wal Ruh. Subbuhun Quddusun Rabbul Malaikati wal Ruh. And this is from Sahih Muslim 487. The second variation that she mentions is Subhanaka Allahumma Rabbana wa bihamdik Allahumma ghfirli. Subhanaka Allahumma Rabbana wa bihamdik Allahumma ghfirli. And this is found in Sahih Bukhari 794. And also the narration of Ali radiallahu anh, and this came in various narrations. He mentions the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his ruku', he would say, Allahumma laka raka'at, wa bika amant, wa laka aslamt, khasha'a laka sam'i wa basri wa muqi, wa azmi wa asabi. This is one of the du'as that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught to Ali radiallahu anh when it comes to the ruku'. So any of these that you recite in your ruku', you are following the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this hadith is found in Muslim 771. Hadith Sahih Muslim 731. So after having recited the dua, the person comes up from the ruku' position to the standing position. As they are going up from the ruku' position to the standing position, they say, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida. Sami'a Allahu liman hamida. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heard those that praised him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heard those that have praised him. And this is taken from various ahadith. For example, the hadith of Anas, the hadith of Abu Huraira, and others than him, Abu Humayd. All of them have mentioned that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever he got from the position of the ruku' to the position of standing, he would say, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida. While standing, the Prophet ﷺ has taught us different variations of du'as to recite while standing. Just as in the ruku' there was du'as that you would recite, there are du'as that you recite while standing also. A hadith that's narrated by Abu Huraira, that's found in Sahih Bukhari, 795, he mentions the Prophet ﷺ, he said while he stood from the ruku', Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And Abdullahi ibn Umar, he mentions a different version as well. And he says, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, omitting the part, Allahumma. Abu Huraira's hadith mentions Allahumma, where Ibn Umar's hadith mentions Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And Ibn Umar's narration is found in Sahih Bukhari also, 735. The narration of Ali radiallahu anhu, he mentions the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he was standing, he said, Allahumma Rabbana lakal hamd. ملأ السماوات وملأ الأرض وملأ ما بينهما وملأ ما شئت من شيء بعد. This was the dua that the Prophet ﷺ taught Ali radiallahu anhu to say while he's standing in his qiyam after the ruku'. And this is found in Sahih Muslim 771. Sahih Muslim 771. Also, a hadith that was taught to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri by the Prophet ﷺ, and he mentions, رَبَّنَا لَكَ الْحَمْدِ مَلَأَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ مَلَأَ مَا شِئْتَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ بَعْدِ أهل الثناء والمجد أحق ما قال العبد وكلنا لك عبد اللهم لا مانع لما أعطيت ولا معطي لما منعت ولا ينفع ذا الجد منك الجد. This was also a dua that the Prophet ﷺ taught to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. And you can see there's a slight variation to it from the dua of Ali. It is very similar to the dua of Ali at the beginning, but towards the end, it changes. And this is found in Sahih Muslim 477. Sahih Muslim 477. And also the hadith of Rifa'a ibn Rafi'. He mentions the Prophet ﷺ has taught him, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fih. And this hadith is taken from an event that happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. He mentions that when the Prophet ﷺ was praying, he said, Sami Allahu liman hamida. One of the companions that was standing behind him said this dua. He said this dua, رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدِ حَمْدًا كَثِيرًا طَيِّبًا مُبَارَكًا فِيهِ. When the Messenger ﷺ finished the salah, he turned around and he asked, who amongst you said this? The dua that was just mentioned. So one of the companions, he said, Ana ya Rasulullah, I did. The Messenger ﷺ, he said, I saw 30 or so angels rushing, competing with one another to be the first one to write this dua. To be the first one to write this dua. It shows the value, the scale of this praise, the dua that this individual recited. And the Prophet ﷺ never rebuked him or refuted him for this dua. This is an accepted dua to recite in the position of standing after the ruku'. So any of these variations that you recite in your qiyam while standing after the ruku', this is also from the sunnah. This is also from the sunnah. So once the person gets into the upright position, and he needs to be upright and firm. He needs to be upright and firm, not sludging, not leaning back. He needs to be standing upright and firm like he was standing in his qiyam for the Fatiha and the surah after it. And this is taken from a hadith narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. She mentions, وَكَانَ إِذَا رَفَعَ رَأْسُهُ. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he lifted his head up, from the ruku', min al-ruku', لم يسجد حتى يستوي قائما. He would not go into the prostration position until he remained steadfast, يعني firm, straight. Some people, unfortunately, you'll find them, they'll come from the ruku' and they'll go straight into the sujood without having fulfilled the طمأنينة and the يعني القيام أو الاستواء, يعني being firm in the standing position. And this was against the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ would not rush in his salah. Everything, he will do it with tranquility. He will do it with its given manner. He wouldn't rush it. And also the hadith of Abu Hurairah in regards to the musi'i salah, the one that had mistakes in his salah, the Messenger ﷺ, he taught him, he said to him, ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَعْتَدِلْ قَائِمًا. Then come back from the ruku' until you are balanced and straight. Until you are balanced, firm and straight. حتى تعتدل قائما. So يعني don't rush into the sujood until you have completed the standing from the ruku' and you have stood there firm and you stood there upright. Then move on to the next action of the salah. Now a question. When it comes to سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ, is this a matter for the imam or also the ma'moom? Those that are praying behind him. Do they say سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ also? Or is it just the imam that says سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ and the ma'moom behind him say رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ? The scholars differed in this. They differed in this position. And they're split into two. A group that said they don't say سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. Those that are praying behind the imam, they don't say سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. They say رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. And their dalil is the hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu, where he mentions the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا جُعَلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُتَمَّ بِهِ. The imam was made to be followed. فَإِذَا كَبَّرَ فَكَبِّرُوا. If he makes the takbir, you also make the takbir. وَإِذَا سَجَدَ فَاسْجُدُوا. If he makes the sujood, then you also make the sujood. وَإِذَا رَفَعَ فَارْفَعُوا. If he gets up, then you also get up. وَإِذَا قَالَ. And if he says سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. If he says that, the Messenger ﷺ, he said, قُولُوا رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. So he instructed those that are praying behind the imam to say رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. So the Jumhur, that is from the Ahnaf and Malikiyah and the Hanabila, say that this is clear evidence that says that the ma'moom that are praying behind the imam is to say رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ, because the Messenger ﷺ instructed him to say قُولُوا رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. As for the other actions, he told them to follow the imam in those actions, to follow the imam in those actions. Except for this action, he differentiated the ma'moom from the imam. On the other group is the Shafi'iyah, and some of the scholars apart from the Shafi'iyah, they mentioned that the ma'moom and the imam, they both say سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. And in regards to the evidence that was brought forth, the hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu, they say that the hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu does not necessarily mean that the ma'moom does not say سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. The Prophet ﷺ here is instructing them, or he's teaching them the dua to say after سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. Because if the case, if it's the case where the ma'moom doesn't say سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ, then that means the imam doesn't say رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the imam says سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. That ma'moom says رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. بمعنى the imam does not say رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ and the ma'moom does not say سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. But that's not the case. And we know that from the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ and his salawat, he always said سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. So he always said رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ as an imam. He always said رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ as an imam. So excluding the imam from رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ, or excluding the ma'moom from saying سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ is not enough hujjah. And on top of that, the Prophet ﷺ, he instructed the companions to pray like the way he did. صَلُّوا كَمَا رَأَيْتُمُونِي أُصَلِّي. And the Prophet ﷺ both he would say Sami Allahu liman hamida, and he would also say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. So do not differentiate the two. Do not differentiate between the Imam and the Musalli. Why? Because Sallu kama ra'aytumun usalli is am. It includes the ma'moom, includes the Imam, includes the old, the young, the women, the men, everybody's included in that. And the action of the Messenger ﷺ was Rabbana Sami Allahu liman hamida and Rabbana wa lakal hamd. So Rajih in this position is the Imam and the Ma'moom both following the Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ would say Sami Allahu liman hamida and also Rabbana wa lakal hamd. So after the person has finished reciting his dua, it is time for him to move into the sujood position. When he goes into the sujood position, we mentioned there is no raf' al-yadayn. This time he just says Allahu Akbar and he goes into the sujood position. Question: does he go down with his hand first or he goes down with his knees first? The scholars, they split into three groups. A strong majority of the scholars hold that he goes down with his knees first. And another group mentioned that he goes down with his hands first. And the third group says that there is nothing that is authentic that pinpoints which the Prophet ﷺ went down with first regarding the hands or the feet. So either is fine. If you go down with your hands or if you go down with your knees, either is fine. As for those that say that you go down with your hands, they use a hadith that is found in Abi Dawood. Where the Messenger ﷺ said, do not go down like the camel and go down with your hands first. Imam albani rahimahullah, he authenticates this hadith. And many of the scholars that hold this view, they authenticate this hadith. The scholars that don't hold this view, they did the da'if of this hadith. Amongst them is Al-Imam Bukhari. He sees this hadith to be da'if. Al-Imam Daraqutni, he also sees this hadith to be da'if. Al-Imam Tirmidhi also sees this hadith to be da'if. They use the hadith to support to going down with your knees, going down with your hands first. This hadith supports going down with your knees first. The other hadith is the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr, where he mentions the Prophet ﷺ would go down with his palms first, with his hands first, then the rest of his body. The scholars, that's a hadith found in Sunan Abi Dawood also. The scholars, they also do tad'if of that hadith. So both hadith have weakness in them. And if you go back to those hadiths, you'll see where they bring their weaknesses from. Some say that tafarrada bih, some say that this is munkar, hadith munkar, and so on. They have their own explanations to these matters. But ala kulli hal, since there isn't a concrete hadith to support either or, the scholars, they are okay with you going down with your hands first or you going down with your knees first. And the closest thing that's been authentically narrated is going down with your knees first, in accordance to the fi'l of a sahabi, the fi'l of Umar ibn Khattab. The only thing that was narrated authentically in regards to this matter is the action of Umar ibn Khattab, where he would go down with his knees first before his hands. Everything else that's been narrated in this matter, they have weakness in their narrations. When it comes to the prostration, the Prophet ﷺ ordered us to prostrate on 7 limbs. And this is taken from the hadith of Abdullahi ibn Abbas. He mentions أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, أمرت أن أسجد على 7. I was commanded to prostrate upon 7. And the Messenger ﷺ describes what these 7s are. And he says, al-jabha wal-anf. The jabha and the anf is the forehead and the nose. So bima'ana, this bridge, this whole section is considered as one. The Messenger ﷺ was ordered to pray with his forehead and his nose, so the whole section. وَالْيَدَيْنِ, the two hands. So his right palm and his left palm going down. وَالرُّكْبَتَيْنِ, and the two knees, placing them on the ground. وَالْقَدَمَيْنِ, and the 2 feet. And the 2 feet. So these are the 7 that the Prophet ﷺ were ordered to prostrate upon. This hadith is found in Sahih Muslim 490. Hadith 490. To prostrate on the head, which includes the nose, so the bridge, the 2 hands, the 2 knees, and the 2 feet. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited the placing of the forearm and the elbow on the ground. He prohibited the placing of the forearm and the elbows on the ground. So when you place your hands down and you're going for the sujood, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited us to keep it down with the palm, rather to lift it up. The Prophet ﷺ, it's been narrated by Wa'il ibn Hujr, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان Afwan is the hadith of Abu Humayd. He says, فَإِذَا سَجَدَ وَضَعَ يَدَيْهِ غَيْرَ مُفْتَرِشٍ. If he goes down into the position of sujood, he would place his hands without making them flat on the ground. Muftarish بمعنى يعني laying. He would place his hands without laying them on the ground. And also the hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu, he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, the other hadith of Humayd is found in Bukhari 828. The hadith of Anas is in Sahih Muslim 493. He says, اعتدلوا في السجود. Be firm, be upright, be balanced in the sujood. وَلَا يَبْسُطَ أَحَدَكُمْ ذِرَاعَيْهِ. And let none of you spread his dira', his forearm, انبساط الكلب, like that of the dog. Like that of the dog. And we know when the dog goes down and he sits on the ground, his forearm is flat on the floor. His forearm is flat on the floor. So the Prophet ﷺ prohibited this action. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited this action. When it comes to placing your fingers, are they spread open? Are they brought together? The Messenger ﷺ would bring his fingers together. He would bring his fingers together. And this is taken from the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr. The hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr, where he mentions أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان إذا ركع فرج بين أصابعه. That the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم, if he goes into ruku', he would spread his fingers. As we mentioned, the fingers were spread and grabbing onto the knees. It says, وَإِذَا سَجَدَ. And if he goes into sujood, ضَمَّ أَصَابِعَهُ. He would bring his fingers together. So while he was in sujood, his fingers were together. And this is a hadith found in Sahih ibn Hibban 1920. Sahih ibn Hibban 1920. In regards to the elbows being spread away from the person's body, and also the toes of his feet spreading towards the Qibla, or facing the Qibla, pointing towards the Qibla. This is taken from the hadith of Abu Humayd also, the same hadith, Bukhari 828. He says, فَإِذَا سَجَدَ وَدَعَ يَدَيْهِ غَيْرَ مُفْتَرِشٍ وَلَا قَابِدِهِمَا. That he would place his hands without them going on the floor, muftarish, and without them being together. غَيْرَ قَابِدِهِمَا, يعني bringing them together. It will be spread out. It will be moved out. وَاسْتَقْبَلَ بِأَطْرَافِ أَصَابِعِهِ. And he would face the Qibla, or he would point to the Qibla, the tips of his toes, أَصَابِعِ رِجْلَيْهِ الْقِبْلَةِ, facing the Qibla. So when he's in sujood, his feet would come folded his toes facing towards the Qibla, where the Messenger ﷺ was praying. So again, arms not flat on the ground, elbows not tucked in, so bima'na they were out, and toes pointing towards the Qibla, toes pointing towards the Qibla. And also the hadith of Maymuna radiallahu anha. She says, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا سجد, that if the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم was to make sujood, لو شاءت بهمة, if a bahma, which is a small animal, they say a small calf or something younger or smaller than it, a small animal, wanted أن تمر بين يديه لمرت, if he wanted to go in between his hands, it would be able to. So bima'na, it would be able to go between the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's how wide his hands were spread. That's how wide his hands were spread. So the hadith of Abu Humayd, it tells us that it wasn't tucked in, and the hadith of Maymuna radiallahu anhuma, it mentions that it was wide enough for an animal to go in between, Now in regards to placing the palms, where do the palms go? Do they go next to your face? Do they go lower? Do they go out wide? Where do they go? It's been narrated from the Messenger ﷺ two different positions. One is that he goes parallel with his earlobes, the other one that he goes parallel with his shoulders. Both have been narrated from the Messenger ﷺ. As for the shoulders, it's the hadith of Abu Humayd as-Sa'idi, the same hadith. But this hadith is found in Abu Dawood 734. Hadith of Sunan Abu Dawood 734. Describing the prayer of the Messenger ﷺ, he said, وَوَضَعَ كَفَّيْهِ حَذَوْ مِنْ كِبَيْهِ. He placed his kaffayn, his palms, parallel to his shoulders. So this is one position. And this is a hadith sahih. As for the earlobes, this is taken from the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr, which is narrated in Sunan al-Nisa'i 889. Sunan al-Nisa'i 889. Where he says, ثُمَّ سَجَدَ فَجَعَلَ كَفَّيْهِ بِحِذَاءِ أُذُنَيْهِ فَجَعَلَ كَفَّيْهِ بِحِذَاءِ أُذُنَيْهِ. When he went into sujood, he placed his palms parallel to his ears. His palms parallel to his ears. And this is also a hadith that is sahih. Both have been narrated from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and if somebody was to do both, then this is from the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In regards to the feet, are they placed together while you're in sujood, or are they spread apart? Nothing has been narrated authentically from the Messenger ﷺ describing this matter. But the scholars, they did ijtihad based on the different aqwal of the Sahaba and the different narrations that came that would give you an indication to this is how it should be done. But when it comes to something authentically narrated from the Messenger, there is nothing authentically narrated from the Messenger. So for that reason, if the person brings them together, or he keeps them apart, there is nothing wrong with doing so. There is nothing wrong with doing so. The most important thing is the toes, as mentioned in the hadith of Abu Humayd, they were pointing where? They were pointing towards the Qibla. Whether they're together or they're separated apart, this is something that there is nothing authentically narrated from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, next week, Tuesday, we'll continue from there, and we'll continue the dua of the sujood, and then also the sitting of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the qiyam from that sitting position. And inshallah, I think next week or the next lesson or the lesson after will be finished with the description of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prayer. And before we finish it, we'll go through the whole description one by one, describing the rajih positions that we declared during our lessons, bi'idhnillah. جزاكم الله خير. وهذا وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. أهلا.